Welcome back to the Bearded Console Gamer, and today, my friends, we are going to be discussing Battlefield 2042 and, more specifically, discussing whether or not you should consider taking the plunge and picking up the game in its current, let's just say, controversial state. And as always, if you enjoy the show, please be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notifications button, as this will help you stay up to date with all the latest content and giveaways on the channel, and help more impressionable sheep find my content, which is obviously great for me, but could well hasten the inevitable collapse of human society. But don't you worry your pretty little heads about that right now, because we are here to talk about video games. And to be more exact, we'll be critiquing the Xbox Series X version of Battlefield 2042, rather than the one made for the Xbox One and the PS4 or PC. Why is that, I hear you ask? Well, that's because the Xbox One version looks like a potato mode Switch port of the game, and also because I'm the bearded console gamer, not the bearded PC gamer. It's simple branding, people. Regardless, we're going to start off with the negative points before moving on to some of the positives. So be sure to stick around until the end of the video to get a full picture of whether or not you should actually buy the game or perhaps wait. But first, here's a quick overview of exactly what BF 2042 is for all the new gamers in the room. Battlefield 2042 is essentially a military simulation game with impressive destructible environment set in the near future that sees up to 128 players compete with one another over 3 distinct game modes. First up, you have Conquest, the quintessential Battlefield experience that essentially takes the form of all-out war between 2 teams of 64 combatants who all have a focus on capturing points and whittling down the enemy's resources to 0. Then there's Breakthrough, a more concentrated game mode that this time splits teams into attackers and defenders and has them once again fight over a series of points that this time retreat as the game goes on. The hook here is that all of the action is focused on a much smaller area, which amps up the chaos and, if you're an attacker, can be a serious problem, as unlike the defending team, you have a finite amount of resources and therefore spawns to squander, whereas their resource count is essentially infinite and you can only lose once all the points are taken. Both Breakthrough and Conquest are playable over the full range of 7 launch maps, and can even be played against AI while you learn the ropes. And if you're not in the mood for full-scale tank-smashing war, then there's always Hazard Zone, a squad-level mission mode which involves competing with other teams to capture data drives protected by AI soldiers and then extract them via the helicopter. Finally, there's the Portal mode, which gives you access to various game modes and maps from the previous games, including Battlefield 2042, Bad Company 2, and Battlefield 3, and even lets you play around with them to create your own bespoke experiences. However, if you're now expecting me to announce the single-player campaign mode, which has been the staple of every Battlefield game up to this point, then gird your loins for disappointment, for there is none. That's right, this time around, DICE and EA have opted to do away with the single-player narrative element of 2042 in order to focus on other aspects of the game. But I mean, even without the campaign, the multiplayer elements of the game sound fantastic if they work, right? But that's the point of this video, because as it stands, there are some pretty significant issues with the game. Now, the worst of these problems can be found on PC, where depending on player hardware, gamers are reporting massive performance issues and bugs that have led to 2042 becoming one of the worst rated games in Steam history, with over 40,700 negative reviews at the time of writing, as opposed to 16,700 positive ones. Thankfully, in my experience at least, the performance issues are nowhere near that bad on the next-gen console versions of the game, but there are still some issues which we're going to point out now. And we'll start off with the balancing issues, because those are by far the easiest ones to fix. As you'd expect nowadays from a multiplayer shooter sooner after launch, there are some weapons that are significantly overpowered compared to the others. The most notable one that I've seen during my time with the game is the PP-29 SMG, or as I call it, the Nightmare Bringer, because every time I come across someone wielding one of these things, I am immediately and brutally murdered. But there are a number of other weapons that are begging for tweaks, nerfs, and buffs as well. And to be honest, bullet dispersal on most of the weapons I've tried feels excessive to say the least. But regardless, some of the biggest balancing complaints that I've heard so far surround Battlefield 2042's vehicles. At launch, hovercraft in particular were essentially divine tank fortresses that boasted the otherworldly bug-granted ability to travel vertically up walls and basically any other surface you can think of, while they murdered you with a combination of miniguns and machine guns. I once thought of them as a fun way to cross the English Channel on my way to holiday. Now I know them as the avatars of indestructible death and frustration that they truly are. And of course, those are just a few quirky examples of the balancing issues in the game, but you can add on top of that a range of exciting and interesting bugs that, when combined together, can make Battlefield 2042 a little bit frustrating to play. During my brief stint with the game, I've encountered numerous bugs ranging from the annoying to the uber frustrating. There were missing graphical elements that outright prevented me from switching classes and operatives during respawn periods, a bug that completely stopped me switching back to full auto on my rifle after selecting single fire mode, reload indicators that simply refused to disappear no matter what, and a general inability to revive or be revived by teammates in the event that you or they are downed. There were also strange and severe performance drops that occurred seemingly at random and which, alongside getting you killed, would mess with your enjoyment of the experience. DICE also saw fit to remove the scoreboard from previous games that let you keep track of the KD of every single player on the board, and instead replaced it with an info board that only lets you keep track of your own actions. And for me, this was a big quality of life downgrade, as in previous games I'd use that big beautiful scoreboard to help keep track of how I was performing relative to the rest of the field. And I'd always loved these little KD rivalries that would inevitably emerge between you and randoms on an opposing team as a match progressed. Beyond that, some of the levels just feel like they lack the natural flow that was present in earlier games, though that's likely a natural side effect of the enormous map size and could even be remedied by upping the amount of transport-orientated vehicles on the map. Overall, it kinda just feels like the game was taken out of the oven just a few months before it was fully baked. But with all of those annoying little complaints being made, there's still a huge amount that I love about Battlefield 2042. For me, it's managed to tread the line between being refreshingly different from previous Battlefield games, while also keeping in touch with the core of what makes the series unique. One of the most noticeable changes is the introduction of a new Rainbow Six Siege-style operator-based character system. At launch, the game shipped with a grand total of 10 operatives, each of which have their own unique skills and abilities. Interestingly though, DICE and EA didn't opt to put any kind of weapon class restrictions on these operatives, which means that you're free to mix and match character perks and loadouts to find a gameplay style that truly fits your preferred method of #murderplay. Furthermore, the Destructible environments the players have come to know and love from previous titles have made a welcome return for Battlefield 6, although I will say here that there does seem to be a reduced amount of destructibility available to the player compared to previous titles. That said, there's still tons of occasions already where I found myself cowering behind a well-placed wall only to see it obliterated by the furious onslaught of a rocket pod-toting helicopter or the angry bark of a mainline battle tank. It's just a sublime feeling of helplessness mixed with holy shit that was cool that you simply can't get in any other multiplayer game. And of course, the gunplay, which obviously sits at the core of the Battlefield experience, is just a huge amount of fun. And in the case of 2042, it's heightened by the introduction of a new weapons modification system which lets you switch out gun components like magazines and scopes on the fly. And that lets you feel like a total badass and also grants you a greater level of flexibility with your gunplay than would otherwise be the case. And another piece of super positive news is that EA and DICE are responding proactively to criticisms being leveled at the game by disgruntled fans. A second update to the game following the launch update is set to be deployed on November the 25th, and that's going to take aim at fixing a slew of known gameplay issues and bugs. Included in this update is a rebalance for the godlike hovercraft, tweaks to the revive system, reduced shot dispersion across the board, and praise be, an increase to weapon recoil for the PP29. A third update, which is set to drop in December, will bring even more improvements, including the introduction of weekly missions that will grant cosmetics upon completion, and over 150 small changes that are going to be implemented across all 7 of the maps. There's also going to be UI changes and just a ridiculous amount of other stuff, so be sure to head on over to the Battlefield website to check out the patch notes for yourself. Naturally, that was just a quick overview of the pros and cons of the game, but hopefully it's given you a good idea of what to expect with Battlefield 2042 in its early launch state. As to the question of whether or not you should buy it, well, that really depends on the kind of person that you are. If you're a hardcore Battlefield fan who's willing to put up with the teething issues, then I'd recommend picking up 2042, as it's a whole lot of unpolished fun and it's only going to get better. Furthermore, you'll be in good company because despite all of the complaints listed in this video and the masses that were not, it's already a phenomenally successful launch. According to DICE, 2042 has already been picked up by twice as many players as Battlefield 5 had at this point in its life. That's millions of players all getting frustrated together at floating murder tanks and being shot in the face by soulless snipers, so come on over and join in that fun. However, if you're not that attached to the series, then you could consider waiting for the next few patches to drop and then checking the lay of the land then. After all, Battlefield 2042 isn't going anywhere, and if you happen to own an Xbox with Game Pass, then the Halo Infinite multiplayer offering is a top-notch alternative if you're looking for some first-person shooter action. And on that note, I'm going to leave it there for today. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the episode, which we know you did, and to leave a comment telling me whether or not you're thinking about picking up the game. In the meantime, be sure to keep it here for all the biggest news, reviews, and reactions from around the video gaming industry.